his book, Warrant, the Current Debate, Alvin Plantinga objected to a number of contemporary theories on warrant from contemporary epistemology, the study of knowledge. And he argued that they tended to be wrong, they tended to be incorrect theories, because they didn't account for proper function. Plantinga argued that proper function is central to the concept of warrant, but what exactly is proper function? What does that mean? Can you explain it in any kind of detail, Plantinga? Yes, he says, I can. And it took him this book to do it. This book, the sequel, Warrant and Proper Function by Alvin Plantinga, published by Oxford, 1993. Here we are on page 19, where Plantinga is describing the idea of warrant. He says, we may say that a belief B has warrant for S if and only if the relevant segments involved in the production of B, are functioning properly in a cognitive environment sufficiently similar to that for which S's faculties are designed, and the modules of the design plan governing the production of B are 1. Aimed at truth, and 2. Such that there is a high objective probability that a belief formed in accordance with those modules in that sort of cognitive environment is true, and the more firmly S believes B, the more warrant B has for S. Now, it's a lot of analytic philosophy speak, and I realize most of you are lost already. Let me see if I can translate this into relatively ordinary English. We may say that a belief has warrant for a person if and only if the relevant segments, the segments involved in the production of the belief, we may say that a belief has warrant for a person if and only if the parts of that person's cognitive faculties or mental faculties that are involved in the production of that belief, maybe not all mental, cognitive, faculties for knowing. My eyes are faculties for knowing, but they're not mental faculties as such, so I should probably stick with the word cognitive. Faculties pertaining to knowledge. A person has a warranted belief if and only if, Plantinga says, the cognitive faculties that are involved in the production of that belief are functioning properly in a cognitive environment sufficiently similar to that for which these faculties are designed. And the modules of the design plan governing the production of the belief, the components of the design of those faculties, are aimed at truth and pretty reliable. Oh, and the more firmly you believe a belief, the more warrant it has. So this is a definition of warrant from page 19. Let's make an immediate observation and then look at another definition of warrant and then make some more observations. The immediate observation, when Plantinga says the concept of proper function is central to warrant, it becomes apparent pretty quickly here on page 19. Well, perhaps quite sooner than that, but for our purposes in this video, on page 19 it becomes apparent that Plantinga's concept of proper function can't just be reduced to just one concept of proper function. It's several concepts. It's the concept of whatever faculties are involved in producing a belief. For that belief to be warranted, those faculties have to be functioning properly and functioning in the right sort of environment, i.e. you're not in the matrix or something like that. And there's more. These faculties functioning in this way have to be reliable, and they have to be aimed at truth. They have to be faculties that have the proper function of helping us believe the truth, reliably so. Now let's go to page 46 through 47, where he makes this a little more clear and specific. As I see it, a belief has warrant for me only if 1. It has been produced in me by cognitive faculties that are working properly. That is to say, functioning as they ought to, subject to no cognitive dysfunction, in a cognitive environment that is appropriate for my kinds of cognitive faculties. 2. The segment of the design plan governing the production of that belief is aimed at the production of true beliefs. And 3. There's a high statistical probability that a belief produced under those conditions will be true. Under those conditions, furthermore, the degree of warrant is an increasing function of degree of belief, and this is intended as an account of the central core of our concept of warrant. As we have seen, there's a penumbral area around the central core, where there are 100 analogical extensions of that central core, and beyond the penumbral area, still another belt of vagueness and imprecision, a host of possible cases and circumstances where there's really no answer to the question whether what we would have would be a case of warrant. What we need to fill out the account is not an ever-increasing set of additional conditions and subconditions. That way lies paralysis, philosophical paralysis, he means. the inability to ever get anywhere, because you're always inventing new clever counterexamples and refining your definition endlessly to avoid them. What we need instead is an explanation of how the account works in the main areas of our cognitive life, and he will turn to that explanation in subsequent chapters. Okay, so there's a lot here. First, Plantinga does not think you need a perfect definition of every situation where a person has warrant. To define warrant, it's not necessary to give necessary and sufficient conditions for every circumstance where a person has a warranted belief. Instead, what you just need to do is describe the paradigmatic cases of warrant. And that's what he's doing. The paradigmatic cases of warrant he thinks involve proper function. Now, again, proper function involves a belief being produced by cognitive faculties that are working properly, and they're working properly in the right environment, an environment that is appropriate for my kinds of cognitive faculties. Again, you're not in the matrix or something like that. And the segment of the design plan of those faculties, that is to say, the segment of the design plan governing the production of that belief, that is to say, the design of whatever faculties are involved in the production of your belief are aimed at truth. So let me just interrupt this long sentence and rewind to try to make it clearer. A belief has warrant for me only if it's produced by the right faculties. A belief has warrant for me only if it is produced by cognitive faculties which are working properly in the right environment, and the design plan of all the relevant faculties is one that's aimed at truth, and it's very likely that this whole process produces true beliefs. In other words, proper function in the right environment of faculties aimed at truth and reliable. This is a fairly good four-part summary of Plantinga's definition of warrant, though I think it's fine, maybe best to just use the term proper function as shorthand to refer to the whole thing. But the term proper function in Plantinga, if we're going to use it to refer to an account of warrant, must be understood to be shorthand for a belief being produced by cognitive faculties which are functioning properly in the right sort of environment, aimed at truth, and reliable. That's what it takes for a belief to be warranted. Now, you might have noticed this is very similar. He's trying to make it more precise and clear. Indeed, this is chapter 2. But it's very similar to the definition we saw earlier in chapter 1. Page 19 has a definition that we looked at first. Here's page 46 and 47. Page 19 is at the end of chapter 1. This is at the end of chapter 2. And he's trying to make it more clear, more precise, more specific. But you just might have noticed something. Page 19, when he describes the conditions for warrant a little less approximately, a little less precisely, maybe a little more approximately, a little less precisely. When he describes the conditions for warrant, page 19, he uses this language. We may say that a belief has warrant, etc., if and only if. If and only if, which means he's describing necessary and sufficient conditions for warrant. Not for all cases of warrant, but for warrant in the central paradigmatic core of paradigmatic cases of where we have warranted beliefs. Now, page 46, a belief has warrant for me only if. Not if and only if, just only if. So on page 19, he says if and only if. On page 46, he says only if. So page 19, he's describing necessary and sufficient conditions for warrant with the central paradigmatic cases. So a paradigmatic case of a warranted belief will have warrant if and only if such and such, all these faculties, proper function, blah, 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 according to page 19, but according to page 46, only if, which is to say necessary conditions. You can only have warrant if you have all these properly functioning cognitive faculties, blah, blah, blah. But what if you have them? Does that guarantee, if all these conditions are met, does that guarantee you have warrant? Not necessarily. Page 46, he's giving a necessary description of warrant, not necessarily a sufficient. So, which is the correct definition? Well, maybe it's just because people, even philosophers, want to read a book and assume that the philosopher is taking the strongest, simplest possible position. People have often thought that Plantinga meant if and only if, that page 19 was the correct description of warrant. Well, that's not correct, because if you go to page 19, he explicitly says that this is a first approximation. In fact, page 19 is the end of a chapter, chapter 1, and the chapter is titled Warrant, a first approximation. I'm not at all sure if that's coming through clearly in the camera. Warrant, a first approximation is the title of that chapter. The definition on pages 46 and 47 is at the end of chapter 2, titled Warrant, Objections and Refinements. I don't know if you can read that. Objections and Refinements is the subtitle of chapter 2. A first approximation is the subtitle of chapter 1. Ergo, the chapter 2 definition, page 46, supersedes, not only by being more precise, but, and presumably, any other necessary respect, it supersedes the first definition. So Plantinga's official definition of warrant here is the one on page 46. And it is describing necessary conditions for the central paradigmatic cases where a human being has warrant for his or her beliefs. And it says that a person has warrant only if, in other words, it's a necessary condition for a person to have warrant, that the belief be produced by properly functioning faculties in the right sort of environment, and that these faculties, the processes that produce, the design plan for the processes that produce this belief be aimed at truth and reliable. And that's what it takes for belief to have warrant. Now, I think in this video, I will give one or two extremely brief observations on the rest of the book, and call it quits for this book, for this YouTube series anyway. In the rest of the book, well, Plantinga may do any number of things. For example, he will suggest that actually, since we're dealing with an account of cognitive design, of design plans that are part of how our cognitive faculties give us knowledge, you have to consider the question of design. The whole question of design, and is mere naturalistic, unguided evolution the best explanation? Materialism, with all its other conventional, traditional accoutrements, all is matter, neo-Darwinian evolution, etc., etc., etc. Is all that the best explanation for the idea that the very existence of human knowledge requires design? Designed cognitive faculties. Or is it the case that this makes the most sense in a theistic worldview? Maybe there's also evolution, but God designed us. God designed these design plans. Plantinga does suggest in this book that it makes the most sense, actually, that we have knowledge. That we have knowledge makes the most sense if there is a God, because knowledge requires warrant. Warrant requires proper function. Proper function, that was a shorthand term there. Proper function requires a design plan. Design plan requires design, which makes the most sense if there's some kind of a designer. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about anyway. All I really wanted to say in this video, to wrap things up, is that in other chapters of this book, Plantinga will fulfill the, so to speak, the promissory note he gave us back in his Reformed Epistemology articles, when he said, I object to classical foundationalism's criterion for proper basicality, a belief that is properly basic, that is to say, one that can be known without being based on evidence from other beliefs. A belief that is properly basic, says classical foundationalism, can only be one which is self-evident or incorrigible or evident to the senses. And Plantinga says that's the wrong criterion of proper basicality, and therefore an objection to belief in God without evidence based on that criterion is a bad objection. But that doesn't mean we have a new criterion. We can say an old criterion is bad, and following the particularist strategy of Roderick Chisholm, we can say that certain beliefs are properly basic without having to state a criterion. In fact, the right way to state a criterion for what makes a belief properly basic is to say, here are some properly basic beliefs, let's study them and see what they have in common, see how we get these beliefs. And then we'll know what is the criterion for a properly basic belief. But Plantinga didn't do it in the Reformed Epistemology articles. He just said, here's the objection to the existence of God, here's the objection to belief in the existence of God without evidence, here's why I don't like that objection, because it's based on a bad criterion for proper basicality. I don't have to give a new criterion in order to say all of this. But I'll tell you how I think we should get a criterion using the particular strategy of Chisholm. But I'm not going to do it now. But he did it, and he did it here. That was the criterion. Pages 46 and 47, that's the criterion. Not only for Warrant, but for proper basicality. In fact, here's what I get from studying Plantinga. And I think on this channel I probably have an article, a video abstract for an article where I explain all this in more detail with a bunch of citations to different Plantinga sources. These conditions for Warrant, these proper function conditions, all four of them, they are necessary and sufficient for properly basic beliefs. They're necessary for other warranted beliefs. You know what else is necessary? They're not sufficient for other beliefs that are not properly basic. You know what else is sufficient? Justification, evidence, logic. Good logical support from the properly basic beliefs. So, Plantinga, in the rest of this book, defends and develops his criterion for proper basicality by explaining that this seems to be how we get knowledge of properly basic beliefs that we know are properly basic, following the particular strategy of Roderick Chisholm. And the examples are more or less the whole set from Thomas Reid. Thomas Reid's list of common sense beliefs. I exist, the world outside my mind exists, my senses put me in contact with the world outside the mind, the past exists, my memory is a source of information about the past, other people with other minds exist, their testimony is a source of knowledge, reason is reliable, and a few more that are just not coming to mind as fast as I'd like them to. These are common sense beliefs, according to Thomas Reid. These are the foundations of knowledge. Plantinga thinks they are the paradigmatic cases of knowledge. But also, this is his set of particular beliefs, using Chisholm's strategy, particular beliefs that are properly basic, that you can look at to reason inductively to a criterion of proper basicality. And that criterion is on pages 46 and 47. And so in other chapters of the book, he will look over some of these other properly basic beliefs and explain how we know them in terms of this criterion. Belief in other persons and in their testimony. Belief in the past. Oh, that was chapter 4. Now, chapter 3, belief, or rather knowledge of yourself and of the past through memory. Chapter 5, perceptual knowledge. And a nice response to David Hume's concerns from his inquiry concerning human understanding, sections 4 and 5. Let's see, chapter 6, a priori knowledge. The response to Hume is chapter 7. And some analyses of how we know facts about probability, etc., etc. That bit about naturalism, that bit about design and God, I think you'll find that in chapters 11 and 12. All right. I hope this commentary on Plantinga's own words on pages 19 and 46 of Warrant and Proper Function was helpful to some of you. I hope that this introduction to the book is helpful to some of you. Good luck reading. Now, the next video, of course, we'll have to do the third book in this trilogy. After Warrant and Proper Function, and after a few years came along, the big one, the multi-hundred-page, the 499-page book, Warranted Christian Belief. Here's where he's going to complete the project, more or less. And here he's going to take the advanced step of the particular strategy of Roderick Chisholm and finish all that stuff he was talking about in the Reformed Epistemology articles. Largely, the whole point of particularism is not just to come up with a criterion. It's to come up with a criterion and then be able to use it. So you look at particular beliefs that you know are warranted, or that you know have proper basicality, or that you know are knowledge, depending on exactly what sort of epistemic quality you're looking for. You look at the particular beliefs, you gather a list, a set, a collection of beliefs you know have that thing, that you know are known, that you know are properly basic. Then you study them to see how they work, how we believe them, why we believe them, what these beliefs have in common, And you reason from that to an understanding of proper basicality. Of course, Plantinga says on pages 46 and 47 of this book that we get these beliefs by proper function. That's his description of how we believe properly basic beliefs. And once you have that criterion, you can apply it to other things to see if we also know them. What other thing is there that you need to apply the criterion to? It's in the title of the next book.